Final Fantasy 15 is kind of a weird game for me. I don't know that I've ever had so many narrative problems with a game that I love as dearly as I do this one. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since I finished it, and so we're going to talk about what makes the game so interesting as well as some of its flaws. There's a lot I want to talk about, so we're going to make this one a three-parter. Today we'll talk about the main cast, next time we'll do the supporting cast, and then we'll look at the story overall. Also, we're going to be in full spoiler territory for this whole series, so if you haven't finished the game, just keep that in mind. Right off the top, let me just say that I really love this game. I've said this before, but generally I don't devote a lot of time to things I don't like, and I'm not likely to make videos on them either. That is to say, I'm going to talk about some of the issues this game has, and there are plenty of them, but it's from a place of love and wanting more for a game that really connected with me. This game is objectively unfinished. Though it's common to say that it's been in development for 10 years, it's a little more complicated than that. Really, the game we have right now is the result of 3 or 4 years of development after basically everything they had except for the story was scrapped, and it was definitely rushed at the end to meet the release date. There's a huge jump in the way that the second half of the game handles its story, and playing through it you can tell that a lot of content was cut, in addition to a lot of comments made from the dev team that confirm it. I really think that given how much was cut, they did a marvelous job of making the story as complete as possible, but the truth is a lot of the incredible setup in the first half had to be dropped to make that possible. This is something we're going to come back to pretty often because it's a source of most of the problems with the game, so just keep that in mind going forward. With all that out of the way, let's talk about the main cast. Easily the thing this game does best, and in fact better than almost any game I've ever played, is characterization. Well, sort of. There's 5 characters in this game that are top tier incredible. Noctis and his 3 friends, and Ardyn. As for the rest of the supporting cast, there's a lot of potential there, but a lot left to be desired too. More on that next time. Let's talk about the 4 gorgeous boys we follow on this road trip adventure. Their interactions and characterization are unparalleled. It's honestly kind of astonishing, and I firmly believe that this is what saves the game and makes it so well loved despite its flaws. Noctis, Prompto, Gladio, and Ignis are all right there from the start. They've known each other for years, and have an established dynamic that we're introduced to almost immediately. You understand who these people are and how they relate to each other really quickly, and you spend the rest of the game with them seeing these relationships evolve and change. It helps that the boys themselves are charismatic and fun and also well-rounded. Noctis is sarcastic and just a bit spoiled, but burdened by the responsibility he never asked for. Gladio is boisterous and goofy, but feels like he has to keep everyone safe. Ignis is careful and conscientious, but has trouble opening up. Prompto is carefree and jokes around, but struggles with feeling inadequate compared to the rest of the group. They all get fleshed out as the story goes on, and if you watch the Brotherhood anime, which I highly recommend you do, you get an even deeper appreciation for them. So we have a solid main party, but the way that they're used is important too. I'll admit, I was nervous about the open world elements in this game because I'm not really an open world guy. I prefer a more guided narrative, and I always feel silly doing all these side quests and exploration if I have a central story goal that I'm ignoring. A great example is Fallout 4, a game that I love, but it's entirely ludicrous that based on the story you're doing literally anything but looking for your child when you wake up. Final Fantasy XV's open world conceit is so elegant and well executed, it's amazing. Your goal at the beginning of the game is to get to Altissia because Noctis is going to marry Luna. That alone is a great end goal because it's not time sensitive. You're on a road trip like one any other 4 friends would take together, and this gives you the impetus to do whatever you want. You can explore, relax, go off track, and it doesn't feel like you're ignoring something vital. Once Insomnia is invaded, of course, things get a little different, a little more serious, a little more urgent. But even then, it's done in a way where you can still plausibly be running around the countryside because you're in a situation where things are so far out of your control you don't really know what to do next. And so it feels okay to keep doing side quests. You do get some scenes of everyone being sad and then it gradually gets light again, and you can definitely argue that the open world buddying around feels a little weirder at that point, but at least for me it still felt like the story was open enough to allow for it. The game by design gets a narrower focus as it goes on, and I think that's by itself a good thing. Open worlds can get tiresome and start to feel repetitive, and although it's reasonable to surmise that some small open areas were intended for later during development, I think it's the right choice for this kind of game because the stakes get so much more dire. What's important though is that the average player is going to spend a long time in that open world first. The boys talk to each other constantly, and this is integral to the game's storytelling. You learn about each of them through their interactions and even just their idle animations as you're driving around. This constant interaction has a very specific function: emotional investment. The game wants you to become attached to these 4 and the bond they have with each other. The climax of the game banks entirely on the time you spent traversing the open world having had an emotional effect on you. As we mentioned before, some chunks of story had to be jettisoned to complete the game on time, and what we have isn't always super clear. As a result, I think the material climax of the story is lost on a lot of people who aren't really sure what's going on. But almost everyone who plays this game is going to have an emotional reaction to the end because they're going to care about these characters and how they feel for each other, more than the average RPG party that meets one at a time with their only major interaction being within the context of their save the the world mission. It's those small moments of you just hanging out at the campfire or driving around that really drive home these characters as real. Remember how Prompto has been taking pictures of your journey the whole time? It's a fun little feature and nice social media integration thing since you can share them online, and a cute character trait for the only non-royal guard in the party to have. And then you get to the final boss, and Noctis wants to take a picture with him. This is an emotional double whammy. You know immediately that Noctis does not plan on making it to the end alive, and you're suddenly going through your saved photos to choose one. If you've been saving a lot of pictures, this is a timeline of your adventure, and I for one cried like a baby going through them, seeing how far we'd come, all the things we'd been through. The game is reminding you of your journey in a visual format with the guys commenting alongside you. It's an absolutely spectacular way to ground the final conflict in emotion. This also comes after a second half of the game that's essentially one gut punch after another. The transition out of the open world and into the more streamlined section of the game finds your friendship with Gladio on the rocks, Prompto lost in the group, and Ignis blinded. This was an incredible decision, and I was genuinely shocked at the real consequences of the conflict. Plenty of games and even plenty of Final Fantasies have killed off party members, but I don't know that any of them have given one a disability that affects the game so much. This is the game playing to its strengths once again. It knows you've built up this friendship that is literally the core of everything the game is about, and in one time skip it completely shatters it. The thing that makes it so good with Ignis specifically is that his injury isn't glossed over. Ignis isn't instantly Satoichi. He's well and truly impaired, and it has a real effect on the game. My heart was in my stomach as I watched him slowly make his way down the mine after the time skip, and I felt awful every time I went too far ahead and got yelled at by Gladio or Prompto. What makes this sequence so great is also that you're in such a sore spot with your friends to begin with. You can't all rally around Ignis like you would before because your group is fractured. It makes what would already be a painful scene so much harder to endure, and it's so good because of that. And again, this is only as effective as it is because you've built up that bond from the early parts of the game. I don't know about anyone else, but stories where longtime friends have a fight and grow apart are some of the hardest for me to get through. I wanted things to get better so badly, and they kind of do, but it's never really the same. You never get that lighthearted dynamic back, and that's hard to accept, but it also feels real. It honestly can't be understated how crazy good the group dynamic is and how integral it is to the game's story. It's absolutely masterful character work, and it elevates the game. Even if you don't understand a bit of what's happening in the story, watching Noctis struggle to tell his friends their final mission will truly be final for him is an undeniably impactful scene. And I think there's a reason it's the final scene of the game. The game understands, especially I think in the wake of having to leave behind some of the other story threads, that this is what matters. This relationship is going to be what people walk away from the game remembering. However, another thing that likely sticks with people is that Ardyn Izunia is an amazing villain that you just hate so much. It's difficult to toe the line between a villain being mocking and irritating, and for me at least, Ardyn does a perfect job. He's just so smug and so in control that it's infuriating dealing with him, but that's exactly how he was designed. Ardyn's a very mysterious character, and at least from reading conversations online, it seems like a lot of people aren't really sure what he was up to, so let me summarize really briefly. So a long time ago, Ardyn was a king who was given the ability to heal the Star Scourge, which is what turns people into demons. As he healed it, however, it began to infect him, and he was denied the blessing of the crystal and scorned by another king in his bloodline who was an ancestor of Noctis. He became immortal and vowed revenge on the kings, humanity, and the gods that abandoned him. With Noctis being the crystal's chosen king, Ardyn sets out to engineer a final battle between the two of them for the fate of Eos and Ardyn himself. He joins the Niflheim Empire and rises up the ranks, inspiring the theft of Insomnia's crystal that sets off the events of the game. That last part is important because it explains why he's actually helping you early on in the game. Ardyn wants Noctis to become more powerful so that their battle can be a good one. He seems torn between hating Noctis' family line and the Astrals, and being tired of his own immortality and being a vessel for the darkness and wanting it to end. And by the way, let's take a moment to appreciate that Ardyn has brilliantly set up a situation in which he is guaranteed to win no matter what. If Noctis is defeated, he gets his revenge and the world plunges into darkness to become more like him, satisfying his crazy Scourge side. If Noctis wins, Ardyn finally gets to sleep, but the crystal and the line of kings will both still end, and he'll heal the world, attaining what his good side wanted to so long ago. He's either going to destroy everything or end the Scourge for good. In the end, he does seem to prefer the second plan, as it's been said by director Tabata that he wasn't using his full power against Noctis at the end of the game. Even though he gets there by killing a bunch of people and driving the entire world nearly to the brink of destruction, he still eventually stops the Star Scourge. Personally, I would say he's beyond redemption. He does get his own self-satisfaction though, so I guess that's something. Ardyn is a fallen hero, a healer who has spent hundreds of years growing more bitter and planning his revenge on a world that denied him. He's He's had a long time to plan, and so he takes what feels like a genuine joy in messing with you. Everything he does is designed to lead Noctis to the crystal and their final battle, but he's just so effortlessly cruel that you can't help but despise him. Even if you haven't seen Kingsglaive, you know immediately upon meeting this dude that he is slimy, but he's your only real source of help, so you have to go along with him. It's not until later that Ardyn starts to straight up antagonize you, and he immediately demonstrates that you're nowhere close to his level. The feeling of helplessness Noctis and the player feel when dealing with him on the train is really well rendered and makes Ardyn feel like an insurmountable foe. He spends the rest of the game taunting and torturing you, and you have no choice but to play his game. You could argue that it gets a little excessive in chapter 13, but I think overall he has a great presence that makes you desperate to find him so you can settle things for good. What makes Ardyn interesting is in opposition to Noctis, the game uses him to look at another angle on one of its main themes, responsibility. Like Luna and Noctis, Ardyn is given a power by the gods to help people, but he seems to hate having been chosen, and in the end it ended up cursing him. Immortality is tough, especially when you're bitter and consumed with an illness you are trying to heal. However, where Luna accepts her destiny without question, and Noctis resists it but ultimately accepts it as well, Ardyn's greatest regret seems to be that he's not remembered as a hero, for which he blames Noctis' ancestor that took the line of kings from him. It's a petty antithesis to the self-sacrifice of both Luna and Noctis, and it makes what's actually a pretty tragic guy into one who ultimately isn't deserving of much sympathy. Ardyn's effectiveness as a villain comes largely from his personality, but there's something that I think holds him back a little bit. He's essentially the only important person in the Empire we have any real interaction with, and this hobbles his arc a bit. The Empire is basically faceless and nameless outside of some minor characters who show up once, and so it's really unclear at first that Ardyn is helping you at cost to his own people. He's betraying and ultimately using the entire Empire for his personal goals, but we can't really get a good idea of what that means because all we ever really see is robot soldiers. We're going to go into it more in the next video, but this is where the lack of the Emperor himself being in the game really hurts it. We see he and Ardyn interacting in Kingsglaive, but I think we needed more of him in the game to put Ardyn's motivations into context. We do get the end result of Ardyn's machinations on Niflheim when we see the damage done to it, but we haven't learned enough about the Empire by then for it to really feel important or impactful. This is where the game's major strengths and weaknesses clash. Ardyn is an exceptionally well-written character, but part of that is that we get a lot of time with him, which with most of the supporting cast we don't. I think he would have gone from a great villain to a legendary one if we would have been able to put his story into more context. As it is, his role in the game is kind of jarring, and it's only in retrospect once you know what it is he wanted that his actions in the beginning make any kind of sense. So the main cast of this game is really well developed and it makes for an emotional and meaningful finale. As for the supporting cast, there's some wonderful characters there, but almost all of them suffer from the exact same problem. The game basically forgets about them, but we'll talk about that in the next episode. Thanks for watching my first Final Fantasy XV discussion. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please hit up the comment section below, like the video if you are so inclined, and subscribe if you want to see more. See you soon!